In March 2005, then President Olusegun Obasanjo signed into law the Electric Power Sector Reform (EPSR) Act to deregulate the sector and allow private companies to participate in electricity generation, transmission, and distribution, which were hitherto the exclusive preserve of the government domiciled in the infamous National Electric Power Authority (NEPA). This was the fourth major reform of the sector in what is today the Federal Republic of Nigeria, with others being the Electricity Act of 1929, the Electricity Company of Nigeria (ECN) Ordinance of 1950, and the National Electric Power Authority (NEPA) Act of 1972. In 2005, the signposts of the reforms were the setting up of the first regulator for the industry in the country, the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission (NIEC), and the unbundling of the corruption-ridden electricity giant NEPA, which was renamed the Power Holding Company of Nigeria (PHCN). The power sector reforms came to a climax in 2013 when then President Goodluck Jonathan approved the unbundling of PHCN and privatization and sale of the country's national electricity assets and infrastructure. What used to be NEPA and later the PHCN was unbundled into 18 different companies and sold at $2.238 billion, an equivalent of 805.68 billion naira, with the government retaining the Transmission Company of Nigeria (TCN) as the only 100% public-owned institution in the country's power sector as at today.
As you know, it's a value chain, and a chain is as strong as its weakest link. So, if the transmission cannot take all that has been generated, then the distribution also cannot get all that I hope to send to them. There is an interface. We have interface problem. So I think Nigerians need to ask transmission and distribution who is not telling us the truth. We generation companies, we are waiting for anybody to come and confirm. In fact, it's out there, you don't even need to confirm. On this daily power reports, you can see every day what the machines are available to do. So it's not something you need to go and look whether they have or they don't have. We have it ready. So I think the question lies with transmission and distribution, and maybe after that assessment, Nigerians can conclude as to which one is the weakest.
People will tell you that perhaps wittingly it might be transmission, because they will say, look, the directors will complain that they have power to set the grid, but transmission can't take them. Discos will say, look, the transmission is not able to drop power where we need it, so we can optimize the commercial value of power supply. So everybody is hitting at transmission. But think about it. Disco is very weak. Disco networks are very weak. Their networks are not serviced. They need to invest so much in revamping those networks and expanding them. So even if you have 10,000 megawatts now, with the discos, be able to take it, optimize and deliver a great generation. Okay, fine. Generation claim to have access, they can do up to 6,000, 7,000, some claim in good days. So they look like the less problematic. But if you're looking at the energy gap, we're talking about 80,000 megawatts by 2020 according to the statistics about demand, supply, energy demand, energy supply gap. In this sector, everything is bad. Every sector is troubled. Every sector doesn't look too viable. The disco sector is perhaps the most troubled because that's the delivery line to customers.
Those countries that have privatized and it has worked for them, places like India, Chile, Brazil, and all, government supported the sector even after privatization. You know, for sometimes in some places for up to 10 years. Not supposed in the sense that it kept giving them money, but it provided the enabling environment for them to thrive, you know, with the necessary backing of government. But that is not the case here in Nigeria. You know, after the privatization in 2013, the government just hands off. It didn't give the necessary backing, that was the support that was needed. We were talking about vandalism, energy theft, and all that. There isn't a strong government is not supporting the discourse in enforcing the laws, the existing laws about vandalism and meter theft, energy theft, and meter tampering and bypass. There is an existing, but government is not. It just feels that okay, we are privatized. Now is your business. Go and do as if you wish with it. Go and generate the money to survive. It's not providing that enabling environment. That support is important. Let government still feel that it is part of this sector, of the running of this sector. In any case, government still has 40% share in these companies.
This is Straight Talk. I am Tyav in Abuja, and we welcome all our viewers in Nigeria and around the world to the program. You can also join me in the conversation here on my online platforms on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Nigeria's biggest economic and development challenge today remains power supply. Unfortunately, there is growing dissatisfaction with the performance of the sector years after the government unconvincingly struggled to sell the idea of deregulation and privatization of the country's power assets as the only solution to addressing the protracted crisis in the sector.
We should go further by even reviewing the Power Reform Act and see where they have the lacuna which authorizes them to sell meters and do all these dubious acts that they are doing.
From the floor of the two chambers of the National Assembly to the streets across the country, the wide criticisms trailing the performance of the private investors who now have the responsibility of delivering electricity to Nigerians is overwhelming. In fact, many, including the labor movement in Nigeria, have already given up on the hope that the current structure and arrangement in the value chain of the power sector has the capacity to solve the country's electricity problems.
Comrades, no industrialization without electrification. There can be no industrialization without affordable, available power. The federal government should stop any action plan that will further give money to the non-performing privatized electricity distribution company discos in Nigeria.
Barely 1 year after the sale of the country's power assets to private investors that have been enjoying 5-year tax holiday from November 2013, following the pioneer status granted them from inception to make reasonable profits within the formative years, the Nigerian government immediately intervened with a 213 billion naira bailout fund in September 2014. The bailout funds for the new power generation and distribution companies came with a 10-year extension of the earlier 5-year moratorium, which was to end in November 2018. Then Minister of Petroleum Resources, Designee Alison Madueke, in company of then Power Minister Chinedu Nebo, Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, and then Chairman of the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, Dr. Sam Amadi, who on September 19, 2014, announced the 10-year extension that is now to bring the moratorium to an end in November 2028 instead of 2018, claimed that the bailout funds are to be repaid to government on first-line charge revenues of the new power companies from 2018. And I quote, until electricity supply across the country improves. This will ensure that the cost of the electricity for ordinary consumers continues to be at affordable levels, end of quote. The Nigerian government has continued to bail out the new power companies since 2013 under different guise, with the unfortunate assumption that providing more money for clearly private companies in the name of bailout rather than the bailout with ideas will help the industry perform better. This was the same story with the infamous National Electric Power Authority, NEPA, and the successor of the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, that both enjoyed handsome allocations under the national budget that ended up in the pockets and fat bank accounts of corrupt public officials. The most recent bailouts for the new private power companies, which were all approved in 2017, are the sums of 39 billion naira for the metering by distribution companies and the 701 billion naira under the payment assurance scheme that is way higher than the single budget of any of the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, with the exception of only Lagos and Cross River states.
The intervention of government in providing the payment assurance scheme of 701 billion naira to ensure that the liquidity challenges being faced in the industry is resolved has helped a lot, because before now, what was happening was that the gas suppliers could not supply gas because they were not paid by the GENCOs. The GENCOs complained that they were not paid by the DISCOs. So what the government did was put aside this 701 billion naira, which is not a grant, but it's like a kind of reserve, that if for any reason you supply gas to a GENCO and the GENCO is unable to pay you, we will pay on behalf of GENCO until the GENCO is able to pay us. If GENCO, if the generating company supplies the distribution company, and because they are not able to, be paid by the DISCO, they cannot pay GENCO, we also guarantee it, and that is what has led to the relative increase in the power situation. Of course, in the area of transmission too, a lot of improvement has been done on the Ikotepeni, in Katampe here, in Abuja, in Odogunya, in Lagos, in Kano and Maiduguri. So we have better transmission and Enugu.
We are not part of those that received it. It wasn't even, well, it was just an intervention fund for those distribution companies that benefited, to do metering, to improve their infrastructure. But thankfully, we are not part of it. So I wouldn't say it's not a welcome development because of the earlier issues I raised. I told you about the liquidity problem in the sector. So I'm sure it helped those who received it. I'm sure it must have helped them one way or the other. But we did not receive it. So I wouldn't be speaking for the others as far as that is concerned.
If the bailout can make your operation smooth, why not? But I know if I take that bailout, my operation will be somehow jeopardized, so I decided not to take it. Yeah, jeopardized in the sense that because whatever you have to pay for that energy, you have to pay for that loan. It's not free money. It's not free money. Once you take it, there will be a point whereby you can't even pay salary, because those funds were being deducted from first line charge, they call it.
I would like to put on the record and for everyone to know that generation companies have not been given any bailout fund. I stand to be challenged by anybody. That from inception, which is from 1st of November 2013 till date, power generation companies have not received any bailout fund from the government or from donor agencies. That said, the 213 billion that was given by CBN, titled Intervention Fund, was to the GENCOs, was money given them for power already supplied, consoled, and money collected, but not paid them. So up till now, I think only about 60% of that money has been disbursed, which is why you must have heard we're saying we're being owed about 1 trillion. In fact, even more than that, but we've just put it at about 1 trillion naira. GENCOs are being owed about 1 trillion naira. So when this story goes about government intervention, it's not to the Gencos. Yes, they intervened in the other value chain, but not to the Gencos, because what they were paid was for power for Gencos and gas suppliers was for gas supply to Gencos, and for Gencos power supplied on the grid but not paid for.
We have the Minister of Information on tape, where he said the payment assurance scheme is to pay for gas that Gencos are unable to pay for, to guarantee that, look, this is paid for to the gas suppliers, and then also for what the discos are unable to pay for the power they pay.
That money was not, again, an intervention to us, but it was for power delivered.
We are yet to come across any of the new power companies that will admit to have received bailout funds from the Nigerian government, including the power generation companies, Gencos. It must be placed on record that most of the companies believed to have benefited from the bailout funds deliberately avoid any media interview where they would, amongst other issues, have to answer questions about what they have done with the money. For instance, we wrote to the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, AEDC, on August 28, 2017. But till date, there has been no response from the management of the company. It is the same evasive attitude for the Benin Electricity Distribution Company, BEDC, which we had written to on November 1, 2017. We also approached the Jos Electricity Distribution Company, JEDC, and the Kano Electricity Distribution Company, KEDC, in November 2017 for special media interviews, but they continue to be evasive about addressing the issues.
It's for generally, not only Edo State. It's generally all over the whole Nigeria.
Okay, in your area, how do you get light?
Although our area, what we go area I'm living, we don't have light. Occasionally we have once in 24 hours we have at least 2 hours.
For good 3 months I don't have light. They said I'm owing up to 1 million naira. How can I use light? 1 million naira. I have not stayed up to a year. So I asked them to call the light. I don't need the light again.
In a month, at times, like we are about 4 or 5. I using one step there. At times, they bring like 100,000.
After the 2005 deregulation of the power sector and the eventual privatization of national electricity assets and infrastructure, in 2013, the country ended up with 11 electricity distribution companies that are now responsible for the provision of supply to Nigerians across the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Each of the 11 companies has what is called franchise states within which they operate, and the electricity supply they provide to their respective customers is strictly based on the statutory percentage of power that is allocated to them from whatever is generated every day, every minute, and time on the national grid. And this is what we know. In the Federal Capital Territory, there is the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, AEDC, that covers the FCT Abuja, Kogi, Nasarawa, and parts of Niger State as franchise, and is at all times entitled to only 11.5% of whatever load is transmitted and available for distribution on the national grid. The Jos Electricity Distribution PLC, JDC, which operates alongside the country's second power plant operated by the Nigeria Electricity Supply Company, NESCO, serves the 4 states of Bauchi, Benue, Gombe, and Plateau, and receives only 6.5% of supply from the national grid. There is the Benin Electricity Distribution Company, BEDC, that has as franchise the 4 states of Edo, Ekiti, Delta, and Ondo. The BEDC is entitled to only 9% of the total electricity load available on the country's national grid. The other 4 states in South Nigeria, namely Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, Cross River, and Rivers, are under the franchise of the Port Harcourt Electricity Distribution Company PLC, jointly owned by the governments of the 4 states under the 4 Power Consortium. These states that are host to a number of the power stations in the country get only 6.5% of available load on the national grid. Lagos State, Nigeria's commercial center, enjoys the highest single allocation of 26% of the entire electricity supply in the country at any given time, and is exclusively served by 2 distribution companies. These are the Eco Electricity Distribution Company PLC that receives 11% of power from the national grid, and then the Ikeja Electricity Distribution Company that is allocated 15% of the supply. There is the Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company, IBDC, in the southwest that serves the franchise states of Oyo, Ogun, Osun, Kwara, and parts of Niger, Ekiti, and Kogi states. This DISCO that operates in 7 states of the Federation, which is the single highest number of states serviced by any of the 11 electricity distribution companies in the country, is usually allocated 13% of electricity available on the national grid for distribution. In the southeast, there is only the Enugu Electricity Distribution Company, EEDC, that serves the 5 states of Abia, Anambra, Enugu, Ebonyi, and Imo as its franchise area. This DISCO is usually allocated 9% of load on the national grid. In northwest Nigeria, there are 2 electricity distribution companies servicing the 7 states in that zone. These include the Kaduna Electricity Distribution PLC that receives 8% of electricity load from the national grid for the franchise states of Kaduna, Kabi, Sokoto, and Zamfara. Then there is the Kano Electricity Distribution PLC that is also allocated only 8% from the grid for the 3 states of Kano, Katsina, and Jigawa. The 4 states of Adamawa, Borno, Taraba, and Yobe in northeast Nigeria are under the franchise of the Yola Electricity Distribution Company that also supplies electricity to Niger Republic. For many, there has indeed been no significant departure for the country from the business model and operations of the public-owned NEPA and later PHCN, and what is obtained with the power generation and distribution companies of today, and then the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, that is still owned 100% by the Nigerian government. We are in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State in northeast Nigeria. That was for a very long time thrown into darkness because of the activities of the Boko Haram terrorist group that struck at the heart of electricity supply installations in this part of the country. But today, as we speak, the state capital and other major towns and communities enjoy about the most steady of electricity supply in the country. The Yola Electricity Distribution Company that serves Borno and the 3 other states of Adamawa, Taraba, and Yobe, including Niger Republic, was sold along with the other 10 distribution companies on November 1, 2013. The private investor Integrated Energy Distribution and a marketing company that had also bought over the Ibadan Electricity Distribution Company, however, declared force majeure, which was approved by the federal government in May 2015. As we speak, the Nigerian government is already working on the sale of the Yola Electricity Distribution Company to yet another new private company, despite the successes and leading performance after the huge investments of public funds to save what a private company had abandoned and given up on.
the owner or the co-investor declare a force majeure that they can operate in Yola electricity, in Yola zone, because of its viability and because of the insurgency of Boko Haram activities and some sort of communal clashes. Then the force majeure was approved and I was posted to YEDC on the 1st of June 2015. I was trying to restore Maiduguri back. We have to rehabilitate most of the, virtually 90% of the substation in Maiduguri to restore power back. Now, when you come to Adamawa, Mubi axis, Gombe, we are all virtually destroyed by the activities of the insurgents. All these are challenges. Let's talk of the communal clashes at the Taraba axis, which cut off power to some local government of Ibi and Ukari. All these are challenges which we face, and we were able to restore power to all these areas. Remember that line from Maiduguri to Damasak is the one feeding the southern part of Niger Republic. A whole state of Difa is being fed from that line.